Close your eyes for just a moment and listen. Not with your ears, but with your soul. Have you ever felt like no matter how hard you work, the money just slips through your fingers? That somehow, just when you think you're catching up, another expense, another setback, pulls you right back down? It's not just about numbers in a bank account. It's about the anxiety that doesn't let you sleep, the guilt of not being able to provide the way you wish you could, the silent tears, the quiet prayers whispered into the night hoping, begging for a breakthrough. Let me ask you this. What if your financial struggles aren't just physical, but spiritual? What if what's holding you back isn't a lack of effort, but an invisible wall, a blockage that can only be broken through divine intervention? Now imagine how your life would change if that wall came crashing down, if what once felt impossible finally opened up, if you were free, not just from debt but from the fear that's held your heart captive for so long. This video will take you into that possibility. It's not a promise of instant riches, but a spiritual doorway, a path of reconnection through one powerful, time-tested prayer. A prayer that has brought peace, clarity, and yes, real financial breakthroughs to those who believed with all their heart. If these words are touching something deep inside you, don't ignore it. Tap the like button, subscribe to the channel, and in the comments write just one word, freedom, if that's what you're seeking. And above all, stay until the end. What you'll discover may be the turning point your soul has been waiting for. His name was Elias, a quiet man, humble in appearance, carrying the kind of weariness that only years of financial struggle can carve into a person. To the world, he looked like just another man trying to get by. But inside, Elias was drowning. Month after month, he fought the same losing battle, barely covering his bills, borrowing from one place just to pay another, always chasing a peace that seemed just out of reach. He had tried everything: budgeting, extra jobs, loans, promises, even moments of desperate silence where he stared at the ceiling late at night, wondering how things had come to this. The pressure was suffocating. It wasn't just the money. It was the hopelessness, the shame, the slow erosion of his belief that things could ever change. But somewhere deep inside, a small flame refused to die. In his darkest moment, when every door seemed shut and his heart felt like it couldn't take another disappointment, Elias remembered something his grandmother used to say. When the world turns its back, look to the heavens. Call on Saint Michael. He never fails. That night, he did just that. Not because he expected miracles, but because he had nothing left. He sat quietly in his room, placed his hands together, and with a cracked voice and heavy eyes, he spoke words that he barely remembered from childhood, an invocation to the Archangel Michael. The words didn't come out perfectly. They were mixed with sobs, pauses, silence. But they came from a place of truth. He didn't ask for wealth or luxury. He simply asked for a way forward, for something to shift, for the strength to go on, and then silence. No lightning bolt, no booming voice, just silence. But in that stillness, something changed, not outside, but within him. A subtle warmth in his chest, a moment of clarity, a sense that someone had listened. The next morning, Elias felt different, not euphoric, not suddenly rich, but grounded, lighter, as if a burden had been lifted from his shoulders, even if his circumstances hadn't yet changed. That day, he took a small step. He called someone he hadn't spoken to in years, someone he had once helped selflessly. That person offered him a small job, which led to another and another. Doors that had long been closed started to creak open. Opportunities began to appear, not grand, but real. The kind of small, steady openings that build momentum. The flow began to return, like water breaking through a dam, slowly but surely. But more importantly, Elias no longer felt alone. He felt guided. Each day he continued the prayer, not just repeating words, but speaking with intention, asking for protection, for wisdom, for clarity, and each day he noticed that his thoughts were sharper. His heart was more open. He was no longer driven by fear, but moved by purpose. That's the real miracle. Not just the change in his bank account, but the transformation in his spirit. Elias was no longer begging the world for relief. He was walking through it with strength, with dignity, with faith. Archangel Michael didn't hand him money. He handed him a sword, not to fight the world, but to cut through the lies he had believed about himself. Lies that said he was a failure, that he wasn't enough, that he was destined to suffer. Elias was never those things, and neither are you. He simply needed to remember who he truly was. A soul not meant for despair, but for light. A spirit not created to barely survive, but to walk in abundance, not just of wealth, but of purpose, peace, and courage. That is the story of Elias. Not a fairy tale, but a testimony. A reminder that behind every burden is a door waiting to be opened by faith, that when you call sincerely, the heavens answer, not always as you expect, but always as you need. The journey begins with a single prayer, a whisper of truth, a moment of surrender, and from there, everything can change, just as it did for Elias. The days that followed Elias's quiet prayer were not loud. They didn't explode with sudden fortune or dramatic miracles, but something subtle, something deeply sacred, had been set in motion. Each morning he found himself waking up not with dread, but with a strange new sensation, hope. It wasn't the blind kind, born of desperation, but a gentle, steady faith that whispered, something has changed. He began his days with a simple ritual. Sitting by his small window, hands folded, eyes closed, he would once again invoke Archangel Michael. The words were no longer clumsy or emotional, but grounded, confident. Lead me, protect me, clear my path. He would say this with a full heart, trusting that even if he didn't see immediate results, the spiritual atmosphere around him was shifting. It was during one of these quiet moments that he felt a clear impression in his heart. Take action. Nothing specific, just an inner nudge to stop waiting passively for answers and to move with intention. That day, he restructured his debts, cut out unnecessary expenses, and sent out resumes, not with anxiety, but with peace. He followed up on old contacts and offered help where he could. The more he moved, the more life responded. And perhaps this is what many overlook. That prayer isn't only asking, it's aligning. It's preparing your spirit to receive by making space. It's tuning your life to the frequency of grace where answers are heard not with the ears but with the soul. If you've made it this far in the story, it's likely because your heart too is seeking something deeper. Maybe you're in a place where you're ready to take a step. If that's you, take a moment, just a brief second, and comment below. Amen. Not for us, but for you. As a mark of agreement with the movement that's beginning in your own life. Elias didn't share his journey with many. He didn't boast or dramatize, but the changes were real. He was offered steady part-time work that eventually became full-time. He met a mentor who helped him manage his finances with more wisdom. And in time, the weight that had once felt unbearable became a story of endurance, and then of triumph. Yet the most profound part of his transformation wasn't what happened in his wallet. It was what happened in his soul. He stopped living in fear, stopped believing he was cursed or destined for struggle. He began to carry himself differently, more upright, more open. The shame that had shadowed him for so long lifted, replaced by a quiet confidence that had nothing to do with material success and everything to do with spiritual alignment. This is the power of invoking Archangel Michael, not to hand you everything on a silver platter, but to awaken you to your true identity, to remind you that you are not helpless, not forgotten, and not broken beyond repair. As Elias continued this path, he began to recognize the divine order in things. Delays he once hated made sense in hindsight. Losses that had crushed him were revealed to be redirections, and the people who left his life had simply made room for those who were meant to stay. Every time he felt overwhelmed, he would return to his prayer. not as a last resort, but as his first response. The words had become familiar but never dull. They were alive, each syllable a step closer to light. So many of us go through life carrying invisible chains, financial, emotional, spiritual. We pretend to be strong while we crumble on the inside. But Elias's journey teaches us this: healing and abundance are possible. Not because the world changes, but because we do, and it all begins with a whisper. With a name, Michael. With a request from the heart, clear my path. Walk with me. Fight for me. This is how you break through. This is how the shift begins. The prayer Elias prayed did not come from a book or a ritual. It came from his depths. A soul-level invocation, shaped more by yearning than by theology. Over time, it evolved into something clear and powerful. A declaration, a request, and a surrender all in one. He prayed not for wealth, but for movement. Not for comfort, but for clarity. Not for a miracle to land at his feet, but for the strength to walk the path when it appeared. Archangel Michael, he would whisper each morning. Warrior of light, cut through the barriers I cannot see. Remove what holds me back. Light my mind, strengthen my spirit, and guide my steps. Where there is lack, let there be sufficiency. Where there is fear, plant courage. And where the road is blocked, make a way. And day by day, this prayer became more than a moment of devotion. It became a lens through which he saw his life. Challenges didn't disappear, but they lost their sting. Delay didn't feel like denial. Rejection no longer equaled failure. His outlook was no longer based on circumstance, but on alignment. This is what prayer, true prayer, does. It doesn't always shift the external landscape immediately, but it completely alters your inner atmosphere. And from that new energy, your world begins to reflect what's happening inside. Elias found that he was no longer triggered by the same worries. A surprise bill didn't send him into panic. A slow week didn't feel like doom. He began to operate from a place of trust, a trust rooted in something greater than logic or luck. He trusted the process because he trusted the presence walking with him. Archangel Michael became more than a figure in stained glass or legend. He became a daily companion, a force of order in the chaos, a presence of clarity and confusion. In ways Elias couldn't fully explain, he began to feel protected, not from hardship, but from despair. Things still came at him, but they didn't go through him. And in this protection, something else began to blossom: vision. Elias started to see not only what he had survived, but what he was capable of. He started setting goals, not just financial, but spiritual. He began planning, not from fear but from faith, and this shift changed everything. Because once you stop reacting in survival mode, you start creating with intention. You start walking in purpose, not panic. And life, always listening, begins to mirror that strength back to you. Elias's financial reality improved steadily, yes, but more than that, he gained peace. He gained clarity. He gained the deep, steady sense that he was not abandoned, that his life mattered, his prayers were heard, and his journey was supported. Every time he sat down to pray, he didn't rush. He spoke slowly, deliberately, not to impress the heavens, but to sink into the moment, to meet himself there, to make room for the sacred. He learned that divine help doesn't always roar. Sometimes it whispers, sometimes it nudges, sometimes it simply holds you in stillness until you're strong enough to rise. And then, when you least expect it, the call is answered, not as you imagined, but in the way that you most needed. This became Elias's rhythm: prayer, movement, trust, repeat. He began to live in alignment, and with alignment came opportunity, peace, strength, purpose. He realized that the breakthrough wasn't one moment. It was the result of many small acts of trust, stacked day upon day. And through it all, Archangel Michael remained by his side, not to remove all difficulty, but to make Elias aware of his own divine resilience, to show him that the light wasn't far, it was within him waiting to be claimed. This is what true transformation looks like. Not instant perfection, but progressive empowerment. Not a life free of pain, but a heart full of peace that no storm can shake. And all of it began with a single quiet prayer. As Elias's life began to shift, it didn't come with noise or fanfare. It wasn't the kind of change that others immediately noticed. It was quiet, gentle, almost imperceptible at first, like spring thawing the edges of a frozen stream. But to Elias, the shift was everything. He was no longer waking up afraid. Each morning began with the same prayer, not out of obligation, but out of deep reverence. Over time, these moments became sacred ground, a space where he met something greater than himself, a space where he met himself again, no longer broken, no longer ashamed. Through his prayer to Archangel Michael, he was rebuilding his own identity, not as a man crushed by debt and fear, but as one walking steadily into light. This light began to color every part of his life. He no longer approached problems as threats, but as chances to trust more deeply. He saw challenges not as punishment, but as preparation, and perhaps most importantly, he stopped seeing his financial issues as a sign of failure. Instead, he began to understand them as a part of his path, an opportunity for growth, humility, and transformation. That realization was a revelation in itself. For so long, he had equated lack with being unloved, unsupported. Now he began to see that the struggle had simply been a call to realign, a divine invitation to step away from fear and into faith. Opportunities began to flow in gradually, in unexpected ways. A friend from the past recommended him for a freelance job. A local business needed someone with his exact skills. Then a chance meeting led to a longer-term role with steady income. These weren't coincidences. They were confirmations, but more profound than the financial recovery was the emotional healing. Elias was no longer reacting from a place of scarcity. He was responding from a place of security. That inner security, a fruit of his communion with Archangel Michael, gave him something no paycheck ever had: peace. And with peace came power. The kind of quiet, grounded power that doesn't boast or dominate, but moves with purpose. Elias became a pillar in his family, a source of calm. He started helping others not with money, but with presence, with listening, with wisdom born of struggle and prayer. He shared his story only when asked, and even then he spoke more of the internal change than the external results. Because, as he had come to know, true prosperity starts within. When the soul is full of trust, the rest begins to take shape. When the heart walks in alignment, provision meets it on the path. And always, always at the center of it all was the same invocation: Archangel Michael, clear my path. Strengthen my spirit. Go before me and walk beside me. The words never grew old. In fact, the more he said them, the more they deepened. They weren't just requests. They were declarations of trust. They reminded him who he was and whose he was. A soul never abandoned, a child of light, a man walking hand in hand with the divine. Even on days when things didn't go his way, when deals fell through or bills arrived unexpectedly, Elias no longer spiraled. He returned to his prayer, and in that sacred space, he remembered: the road may bend, but it never ends. The light may flicker, but it is never extinguished. And slowly, a new version of Elias emerged. One whose wealth was not just measured in currency, but in clarity, in courage, in connection. He had faced the darkness and found the strength to walk through it, not alone, but with the might of heaven beside him. This is what Archangel Michael does. He does not erase the storm, but equips you for it. He does not make you immune to struggle, but teaches you to rise above it. And in doing so, he leads you not just to financial relief, but to spiritual rebirth. For Elias, this was no longer a story of loss. It had become a story of light, a life rebuilt not from luck or chance, but from prayer, perseverance, and the unwavering presence of a heavenly protector who never left his side. Elias's life didn't become perfect. He still faced uncertainties, moments of doubt, and unexpected turns. But the man who once lived in constant fear of not enough was gone. In his place stood someone resilient, someone with deep roots in trust, who understood that his peace didn't come from a bank account, but from the divine order he had invited into his life. His relationship with Archangel Michael had become a living connection. Not just a figure from spiritual tradition, but a guide who walked with him daily. There were no more frantic prayers of desperation, only conversations rooted in love and certainty. His faith had matured. His spirit had expanded. He no longer lived waiting for miracles. He had become a vessel for them, and this is the true power of spiritual alignment. It's not about escaping reality. It's about transforming how we live within it. It's about remembering that we are never alone, and that the help we seek isn't distant. It's already at work when we open our hearts and surrender our fears. Today, Elias lives not just in provision, but in purpose. He gives freely, speaks gently, and carries an energy that others feel. People who meet him often say, "There's something peaceful about you," and they're right. That peace was earned through prayer, cultivated in silence, and sustained by divine partnership. If you followed his journey until now, you know this isn't just a story about financial recovery. It's about awakening, about walking with the angels, not just in times of need, but in every moment. Because when you truly align with the divine, even the storms begin to serve you. Elias's story is an invitation to believe again, to pray again, to walk with trust, even when you can't see the full path. Archangel Michael is not only with Elias, he is available to you, right now. All it takes is a whisper from the heart. And now, if this message has touched something within you, if you felt comfort, hope, or a gentle nudge to reconnect with your own faith journey, we invite you to continue walking this path with us. There are more stories, more prayers, more lights waiting for you. Watch the next videos on our channel for deeper guidance and powerful prayers. Leave a comment below, even a simple "I believe" or "Amen," to affirm the light you're ready to receive. Like this video to help more hearts find this message. Subscribe and tap the bell icon so you never miss a word of encouragement, inspiration, or divine connection. May Archangel Michael protect, guide, and walk beside you. Always, peace and blessings.